What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick.
Miller.
Jammin Jon.
Shredlord.
And we are back with another discography ranking, and one that I know a ton of you have been waiting for us to do. And believe me, I've been anticipating and dreading it, because this is another one of those bands where, yeah, they're just grossly consistent, but I fucking love them. We are going to go over and rank all the studio albums from New York death metal legends Immolation. Now, when it comes down to my first exposure to this band, it actually came courtesy of an old Roadrunner sampler called At Death's Door, Part 2. There was a song on it called No Forgiveness Without Suffering by Immolation. I heard it, was like, Jesus Christ, that's probably the heaviest thing I think I've listened to. So the other really heavy tracks in there, because Disincarnate was on there, and fucking Malevolent Creation. Yeah, the 90s had a lot of great death metal. But I didn't get any of their stuff until much later, and pretty much instantly became a fan, and this has been like one of my favorite death metal bands for a number of years now.
I got into this band probably around like 2014, 2015, somewhere in there. Was riding around with this guy, and he had really heavy music playing, because that's, you know, what happens. And I remember asking him, I was like, who's this band? And he was like, oh, this is Immolation. And I had initially thought that Immolation was a black metal band. I confused them with Immortal because, you know, at the time I wasn't into black metal, and I was like, no, fuck these guys. And I was like, wait a minute, this is Immolation? Holy shit. I think it was around the Kingdom of Conspiracy, actually. Yeah. I think that was the first one I heard, and I was instantaneously a fan, and how can you not be? Because it's Immolation. So yeah, that's my history at least.
Yeah, and he liked them so much, the very next, shortly thereafter either way, is like normal chit chat in the kitchen of adding different bands to a list in my phone, and Immolation was one of them, and I checked it out, and I remembered hearing of them back in the day. I always talk about my buddies Chris and Tim from back in the day, but I never got into them again because I thought they were like a black metal band, and I just don't like black metal. So, you know, whatever. But
we're gonna rank some black metal. All that shit's gonna change, or he's gonna hate it more.
Changed a little bit, but me and Shred have very similar tastes. So, but yeah, that's where I got into them. Then Jammin Jon was so fucking excited about it. He was like, oh, you gotta choose these guys, you have to check these guys out. If you don't check any band, these guys you gotta check out.
If you don't check these guys out, you're doing yourself a disservice.
Then you have never checked out any guys in your life.
Get the fuck out of my house.
I was the last to check these guys. And it basically came on Nick's recommendation. I was not familiar at all. However, I love that they're from Yonkers. That immediately made him like them. And you got a good Italian boy, Mr. Vigna, so, you know, I'm all ears. Being an Italian boy myself, I immediately ears perked up, and we dove into this discography.
So we'll get into the history of this band. It was originally founded by drummer Dave Wilkinson and bassist vocalist Andrew Sakowitz. Now, they originally formed as the band Def Con in 1986, and then the same year they changed their name to Rigor Mortis. Now, those two would independently record a demo, Peace or Tyranny. They would actually hire one Robert Vigna as a session guitarist, who he would actually join the band later in 1987. That same year, they brought in a second guitarist, Tom Wilkinson, and then they recorded their second demo, Warriors of Doom. So in 1988, there was a little bit of a change in the lineup. Sakowitz chose to leave the band, and he was replaced by one Ross Dolan, and Dave Wilkinson would also leave the band, and he was replaced by drummer Neil Bobak. Now, since they changed around the lineup so drastically, they decided, you know what, maybe it's time to change the name. They changed the name to Immolation. Worked out pretty well, because there was also the band Rigor Mortis out of Texas, and they kind of avoided confusion at that point, and, well, Immolation sounds fucking evil, so yeah, that's good for death metal. Now, while they put out a rehearsal demo in March of '88, they didn't put out their first proper demo until July as Immolation, and that same year they would also put out a second demo, which would become their legendary self-titled demo, which really got around. Now, that demo actually circulated around quite a bit. It became a very popular underground demo. So after gaining all this momentum, in 1991 they ended up doing a split with future New York death metal legends Mortician called A Day of Death, which probably was the nastiest split EP in 1991, because Mortician is insanely fucking heavy as well. But unfortunately, another lineup change would happen 6 weeks before recording this split. Bobak would end up leaving, and he was replaced by Craig Smolowski. But at this point, they ended up getting signed to Roadrunner Records, which, if you're a giant death metal fan or metal fan, especially a 90s death metal fan, That was the label to be on. So before they would actually release their album, they were actually featured on a Breaking Barrios promo. It was a series that Roadrunner was putting out to show off new bands. They were featured with the likes of Suffocation, Pestilence, and Solitude Eternus. And, well, pretty much since Immolation was just going to re-record all the songs they had been demoing for years, they pretty much had an album ready to go. They just needed to find a studio. So they tapped one Harris Johns to the production. He had actually worked with bands like Halloween and Sodom before. And on July 16th, 1991, they would release their debut album, Dawn of Possession. This is my number 4 on the list. I love this debut, and honestly, it kind of stands out from a lot of the other stuff that we'll go over because this is notably more old school death metal. They really hadn't kind of got into the style that they would pretty much just own throughout their entire career, but it would still kind of trickle out in certain songs. Namely, My Prayers, you start hearing a lot more of the distant stuff that you get really used to in terms of this band's discography, but this is notably a very aggressive, fast album. Smolowski's drum work is fast. It's chaotic as hell. It's way more just flat out chuggy riffs, especially on the eponymous song Immolation, which is just a riffy fucking banger. It's technical, it's very brutal, and it still manages to squeeze in a bit of atmosphere. Like, there's still some of that token evilness that you would kind of associate with bands like Morbid Angel. I mean, they're very comparable in a lot of ways, especially at this point. Those Left Behind, I think, has some really awesome token, sinister melodies that kind of just scream the amount of evil that is displayed on this album cover with angels getting fucking torn apart. This is an absolutely badass album. And again, this is a pain in the ass to rank because all of them are awesome, but they started off really fucking well here.
I'm at 5 with Dawn of Possession, and it's like, so Immolation for me, I don't love this band as much as these two guys. I like this band, and they're very consistent, like we're going to say, throughout their whole discography. That's why I dig Immolation. I don't find myself going back, but after listening to this over the course of, about a month or so, I'm appreciating them a little bit more in their eerie ambiance, and the way they're able to do stuff like in Despondent Souls in this album, where they're able to have this like fast tremolo guitars, these really fast drums, but the actual melody to it is very basic, and there's not very many notes. It's just played very fast, which totally brings this like kind of like a duality to the song, which I really dig, and they do that a lot throughout their discography. And one of the things that I love about them and what sets them apart from other bands. After My Prayers, the beginning is cool, and they have this like little buildup in there, but I feel it doesn't hit as hard when they make that change, for me anyway. Oh, and Into Everlasting Fire.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That middle groove is just super, super fucking catchy. And then they have that build-up there, and then that scream comes in there, and it's just fucking perfect like music. It's awesome.
Yeah, Ross's vocals are definitely very different on here. He's kind of more of like a mid-range. You'll silly hear him start dropping.
Yeah, he
with
comes
each
down
album.
semitones every album.
He was like a young Cookie Monster.
Yes. C is for Cookie.
That's
enough for me.
good
And
enough.
R is for Ross.
I also had this at number 5. Ranking Immolation is extremely fucking difficult because of how awesome they are.
I love how we're starting these conversations already, and we have 10 more albums to
have
go.
more albums to go. Well, but which segues into my next point. This record is notably different from all the rest of the Immolation records as far as I'm concerned, because they really hadn't, I think, found what would become their token sound yet. This is speedy as fuck.
Yeah.
Like, that was more so than groove that they become focused on later. This record was all about pummeling fucking speed and nasty riffs. Those Left Behind, No Forgiveness Without Bloodshed, dude, Burial Ground, and After My Prayers, I think, has riffs in it that would become classic Immolation. Like, it's what, to me, most sounds like even current Immolation now. It's more straightforward than any of the other records. It's not as bizarre in terms of groove, I would say. I don't know how to explain that.
A lot more like thrashy influence.
Yeah.
Like, that kind of just go
You don't
for
get
it speed.
much thrash.
I mean, even
from this band.
the blasts are like kind of that galloping blast, like kind of like Igor Cavalera.
Off the bat, even, dude, fucking Rob is a hell of a guitar player. It shows instantaneously. You're just like, dude, what is this guy doing? But yeah, it's number 5 for me. I fucking love it.
I have this way higher, and maybe it's because I just love that thrashy tie to it. This is my number 2. Immediately, I was kind of... First of all, I've never listened to a whole album by Immolation from front to finish, so I did it the old-fashioned way. I started at the beginning. This is the beginning. And one of the first thing I noticed was the musicianship was top-notch. I thought everything was really tight. I thought even though the musicianship was tight, the guitars were still nice and raw, guttural, you know, just they had some heft to them. Dirty, you know, just kind of raw and dirty, sounding good. The songwriting wasn't terribly complex, but it was just kind of like this badass, high-strung death metal on coke, and it was fucking awesome.
So this would actually end up being their only release on Roadrunner Records. This actually kind of came at a time where Roadrunner had started the culling in terms of like getting rid of a lot of death metal and underground acts, and to them, this album underperformed because it sold less than 30,000 units. But that didn't stop them from touring on this, and they toured their asses off. And they had kind of a long layover here. To buy some time, they worked out a deal with Repulse Records out of Spain to release their early demos and live tracks. That came out as Stepping on Angels Before the Dawn. That was in January of '95. Around the same time, they had inked a deal with Metal Blade Records and begun working on their second album. Now, they teased some material with their 94 demo, simply called 94 Demo. All of the songs on that demo ended up being on this new album, and this would kind of showcase a shift in terms of style. And honestly, this album would pretty much have all the hallmarks of their sound throughout the rest of their career. So they got Wayne Dorrell and Jim Forbes to produce and mix this, and got Eddie Schreier to master this one. And on February 12th, 1996, they would release Here and After. This is my number 6 album, and I love this album, and it fucking pains me to put it at fucking 6, but honestly, this is where they kind of just got started in terms of doing what they do so well. This is where all the distant harmonic melodies come in, all the pinch squeals, the song structure gets a lot more wild. It sounds notably more evil. And the fact that they do another thing that shows up in here is slow it down a bit. There are more groovy sections on here. This isn't a wall of like bullet train songs like the first album. This actually takes a lot more time to build up mood. The production here, notably different, a little bit murkier, a little bit, you know, just more sinister sounding. I would describe this as chaotic but catchy. Burn with Jesus, Here and After, the title track is amazing. I Feel Nothing, that descending melody towards the end, it's just pretty much like just walking down to fucking hell. But another thing that comes in that I think is really interesting and becomes kind of a test of every drummer they get is the rhythms. The rhythms get more complex just as the guitars get more complex. And you start hearing fills getting worked into a drum pattern. So an entire beat will go on like a little like extra measure or so because they're squeezing in a fill as part of the rhythm. And again, that becomes another hallmark of this band's sound. And the only reason why this is a little bit lower is because I think they do it better on other albums. You know, this again is pretty much the blueprint for everything they would do later, and they just fucking crush it. Christ Cage is just amazing. I love that clean intro. But Under the Supreme, I think, is like a little bit of a callback to the first album. Like, it's notably more fast and aggressive. But yeah, this album's amazing. Again, I didn't want to rank this one as low as 6, but there's so much good stuff in this discography.
There's a lot of classic albums that have been ranked 6 before. I wouldn't feel bad at all, man.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There it is.
Somehow it always gets in there, dude. It always makes its way in.
I had this at number 6 as well. I also side with Nick the fact that I don't want to rank it this low, but I mean, what are you supposed to do? Tons more fucking groove. Like, don't get me wrong, I love speedy death metal, but I also really like my groove in death metal, and this is where they brought it. Really, my legit only gripe to this record whatsoever is the production of the drums, and even then, after you get 2 or 3 songs in, I mean, you don't notice it anyway, dude. Yeah, Here and After, I Feel Nothing. Dude, Away from God, that song is just fucking plain sick. Those riffs are nasty. Shorter album, shorter songs, but who cares, dude? I love the groove, and this is where they really start to lay on the Immolation that they sound like now. I, for one, love those drum fills within a fucking beat, dude. That's just, nobody else does that. Nobody else does it quite like Immolation. Never have, probably never will. Yeah, it's number 6.
And I had it at 666.
6,
Of course, gotta do that.
6.
And that wasn't planned. We converged at the beginning and like, where'd you have it? We did the Spider-Man thing for a minute. But I Feel Nothing, for me, is kind of going with what they were saying, it's kind of a transition thing. There's a lot of notes in here that they'll hit later that they do better, in terms of molding their sound. I feel Nothing is a good example of where they're going with it. That off-time, eerie, spooky feel to it. These mismatched notes that they hit with these things, it gives for the ambience of that just dark and eerie feeling, which is awesome. You kind of want to watch like old 70s horror movies, listening to these guys just mute the movie with Immolation going in the background. Nailed to gold. The drums are great. Everything, and like you guys were saying, everything kind of drags at the end of their phrases, kind of a stumble step, and it really adds to like kind of the chaotic nature of everything, adding to like a instability to things, which you don't find that word being used to describe music in a good way, but it certainly helps here because it adds to that frantic fear horror movie type thing. You just tripped and the fucking dude's there, man. He's there, and you fucking tripped. Number 666.
I'm the weirdo. I put this at number 3. It could possibly be interchangeable between that and Dawn of Possession at number 2. They add some dissonance, they add these atonal sections to give it atmosphere, and I really enjoyed it. While it was a little bit of a different cup of tea than its predecessor, I thought the songs were great, and while to go to the point that they said, where they feel like they're going to get these kind of vibes but maybe better, you can't rewrite or you can't duplicate the songs. So what I'm going to say to counter that is I feel like I like the songs here maybe better than I like some of the songs later on in the discography if we're comparing songwriting to songwriting, regardless of the fact if maybe they added a little bit more of this or added a little bit more of that. You can't just keep recreating the same songs. And for that, I think that's why these albums that maybe you guys think are a little bit lower, maybe a little bit higher for me, because as someone who never listened to them before, I'm kind of just going off of first impression listen. And I like the production. I guess I don't listen to the drums as much as you do, so I didn't really pay attention, but I thought the production on this, the guitars were a lot cleaner and cut through better. And I felt like that gave it a little bit more of like a, I don't know, just like a more aggressive of a tone. And I definitely appreciated that. So I think it's a really, really good album. I really enjoyed the songs, and it could be interchangeable with Dawn for me. It was just a little bit of a different flavor. So
I mean, this could be like, when Rin said he was going to rank Pantera but never did. This album is my number 1. This album is also my number 1. This album is my number 1. I mean,
I could make an argument for about 5 of these albums being my number 1.
Me too.
If I'm being completely honest here.
Yep.
So not long after this album, Craig Smolinski would exit the band and he would be replaced by Fallen Christ drummer Alex Hernandez. Now the band would spend a lot of time on the road, including a European tour with Cannibal Corpse and Vader, and they would do the Milwaukee Metal Fest in 1998, which, hey, that shit's back again, and I'm still pissed I missed it, but hopefully it comes back next year. So not long after the touring, they actually decided to settle down in the studio, and this is where they would find kind of their main guy, Paul Orfino. He worked at Millbrook Studios in Millbrook, New York. Believe me, I'm going to be bringing that place up a lot from here on in. He had worked with such notable acts as Liquid Tension Experiment, Jolyn Turner, and Riot. So Immolation, definitely a different kind of animal to tame there, but he was definitely down for the job. So Paul would produce and mix this album, and he would get one Brad Vance to master this album. So on May 31st, 1999, they would release Failures for Gods. I have this at number 8, and yeah, I like this album. In fact, I think it works a really cool balance between Dawn of Possession and Here and After. It is notably faster, more brutal, but it also includes all the twisting, angular, distant riffs that they had really become known for in the second album. But there's a bit of an issue with the production. I think this is like the worst produced album they have. Agreed. And man, it really comes down to the drums, which sucks because Alex Hernandez's drum performance is fucking awesome. I like Smolinski. I think he did a great job in the first 2 albums, but Alex is notably tighter, and I think he's able to really kind of work with the complex riffs a little bit better. Like his fills are a little bit more creative. But the drums sound like a sputtering truck or like a horse trotting really fast. Like the bass drums sound terrible on here.
The bass is missing.
Yeah, the bass is missing.
MIA.
Ross is still growling his guts out to kind of make up for it, but musically, I like this album, just like I like all these albums. I think it has great riffs. There's killer songs. No Jesus, No Beast.
Yep.
What a
that song
fucking
is
vicious
awesome.
song.
Yep.
Again, the title track, which, pretty much spoiler alert, the title track on most of their albums are generally fucking awesome. Ross sounds more sinister in here. Like, this is where you start hearing him drop down a little bit. It's less of that mid-range kind of growl, and it's getting kind of down to like an adult Cookie Monster, we'll say.
The balls have finally dropped on that little blue fuzzy bastard.
There's more breakdowns on here, I would say, too. Like, you just get some flat-out brutal moments. But again, kind of working that, fine line between the first two albums. Like, it's still groovy, but it's groovy and brutal this time. And overall, I dig this album. It's just the production is really, really bad. And the fact that Paul resurfaces as one of their main guys in terms of production on here makes me think, Brad did it. I'm just going to go ahead and say I think Brad did it. The mastering, maybe that's where he fucked it up. But, this is just a fucking awesome album, just hampered by bad production. So, it fell. And that is literally the only reason, because, again, every song in here I think is fucking killer.
I had this at number 7. It fell a little bit because of, the production stuff. And it makes sense you said the master thing, because it is kind of like an overlying shittiness throughout the thing.
Let this sprinkle on this layer of bullshit and ruin everything.
It's like they invited Joe over after Taco Bell. It's like, hey, you want to shit all over this?
I will.
He will. Don't call that bluff.
It's Joe's pleasure to shit at any given time.
The title track, although it's awesome, the clean little tremolo part lost me a little bit there. And it seems like throughout the album there were some things they were trying out that some of it didn't work. But overall, just the musicianship, the music behind everything is killer. The drum work is great. There's these, I didn't write the song title, but there's this part where these two riffs share a melody, and they kind of go to this high part, and then they sing it down to the next part, and they do this lower tone, and it just grooves so well. It works really well together. The solo break in Devil I Know, that's just awesome ear candy. That whole fucking just go to that and listen to that, and it's like, yeah.
And Rob's guitar work, I think, gets better like with every album.
That was one of the first things I noticed about this album when you took the first lead on it, and I was thinking to myself, how really, like, when you go from the first album to now, the leads are getting a little bit longer, a little bit more melodic, fitting the sections a little bit tighter. So
Starting
definitely
to fill in those very few gaps that this band kind of has, really. But yeah, number 7.
I'm the weirdo again. I had this at number 5. The only complaint I had about this album was from a production standpoint. Yeah, the production is awful, but I really like the focus and attention to the groove and the groove and the feel, I don't know. But basically these grooving sections, such as, the sections in No Jesus, No Beast, Devil I Know, those kind of sections are really heavy in this album, and I really appreciated it. Once again, I said the lead guitars, I just keep noticing as the albums go on, they keep getting better and better. I wasn't crazy about the sound, like I said, but really the only thing holding this album back is the production, and it's a perfect candidate for a remaster. It needs a remix and a remaster.
Yes, it does.
I mean, that's all this album needs for me. The songs are great. You're adding more of what makes Immolation. They're continuing to grow. It's just the way it was recorded was not the best quality. So yeah, number 5.
Oddly enough, the production is why I had this one dead last at 11. The songs are great, dude. And bringing Alex Hernandez in on drums, there's no knock on his performance whatsoever. It's just the fucking mix. They fucked him on the mix. Yeah, the groove continues. No Jesus, No Beast. Again, we were all talking about the leads. Dude, the leads just get tastier. Failures for Gods, of course. The title track is a beast of a fucking track. The haunting fucking descending melodies in The Devil I Know. It's a great record. All the songs are great. They just fucked it on the production, and that's the only reason I have it dead last. That's it. That's the only thing holding it back.
I also love the song Your Angel Died, and that goes out to everyone that thinks they have an angel watching over them. Because you don't. Because he's dead.
He did.
So naturally, at this album, they toured their asses up because that is what Immolation does. They did an Unsaved in the U.S. tour with Gorguts and Deicide. I believe it was Deicide. I know that doesn't sound like a sick lineup.
That sounds like a fucking amazing lineup. Do it again.
I know. That sounds like a great fucking idea. Woo. And they even did a European leg of that tour also in fall of 1999. Now, by 2000, they were back at Millbrook Studios. Despite how the production went on the last one, They wanted to give Paul another chance, and Paul actually mixed and mastered this one. So I, again, think it might have been Brad. And pretty much wasting no time, on November 7th, 2000, they released Close to a World Below. And spoiler alert, we all agreed on something for once.
Yeah.
This is our #1 album, Universal. This is also the first Immolation album I ever bought. This is where I started, and this has been the standard pretty much ever since. Everything about this band got bigger, more epic, more sinister, atmospheric. The riffs are tighter. There's actually like notes of melody to it now. And it's kind of odd, like, because these melodies definitely would not appeal to anyone outside of people that love death metal, but there are legit interesting hooks in here, and they are kind of unique to Immolation once again. They kind of refined down all those dissonant harmonies and actually developed like catchy songs out of it. Like Lost Passion, Put My Hand in the Fire, oh God, Father, You're Not the Father. Like this whole album.
My favorite.
This whole fucking album, especially the last 4 tracks. The last 4 tracks might be some of the best material they've ever written. I absolutely adore this album. It is bordering on perfection in terms of a death metal album. Like there are no lulls in energy. The atmosphere is just steeped in fucking evil. The groove is ever present on here. Hell, I'd even say Lost Passion kind of sounds like the most sinister Gojira song they never wrote. Again, they found a way to be catchy with this and did not lose one bit of their edge and their brutality. This album is God tier in my mind. I will continuously gush about this, but it's time for these other guys to gush.
Yeah, this album, this was perfect. It basically brought in everything that you would ever hear them do, and in the perfect balance. The incredibly lush, evil atmosphere that they were able to convey throughout this entire album, while still not losing an ounce of just fucking violence and brutality, made this a recipe for a perfect album. Every song I enjoyed. I felt like the songwriting was very inspired. Once again, the musicianship was top notch, and as the band keeps going, they keep getting better and better, and this, to me, is like the Epiphany Mount Rushmore album.
Yeah. Death metal.
Yeah, again, also #1 for me. This is like the perfect culmination of everything that they've done before and everything that they will continue to do. It's well evenly balanced. The groove is amazing. The fucking guitar chugs, harmonies, the evil melodies. It's brilliant. It's like a perfect mixture between Dawn of Possession and Here and After, and again, everything that they would do after it. All the songs, whoop ass. Father, You're Not a Father is probably one of my favorite songs. The way that Unpardonable Sin just kicks in the fucking door. This is the epitome of what Immolation is. And what they would become. Just a perfect record. There's no complaints about anything. The mix is perfect.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
Father, You're Not a Father sounds like a Jerry Springer episode, though.
It does.
Like somebody...
Rest well, Jerry.
Rest well, Jerry. But it definitely sounds like someone's going on national TV to bitch about their dad.
I mean, Ross says it with a lot of conviction. I think he's not a father. I also have to say the ending melodies on Fall From a High Place are some of the most sinister, but honestly, kind of one of the catchiest moments they've written to this point.
Well, I like, too, that all the grooves are elongated. It's not as, like, transition happy as it had been with the past couple records. Just, it's perfect.
Yeah.
I'm going to let Miller fucking gush now.
Yeah, and I'm basically the same thing. It's kind of a perfect album, and there's not a lot of those crazy sporadic transitions. They really fall into these things, but don't stay on them too long. You know, they switch, and everything seems to flow really well, and everything makes sense. Close to a World Below is yet another great example of how they have this basic melody. When you strip away most of it, it's just a very basic chord progression, but they managed to create this wall of sound that's so interesting to hear, just off a basic melody, and it's kind of crazy. Hire Coward, that's one of the strongest openings I think they've ever had.
Heavy as nuts.
Yeah,
dude.
just brutal. Right off the gate running. It's like you open the gates, the dogs are gone, man, and you're just going to be left in the dust if you don't follow.
Hernandez's drum work on this album is... this is one of my favorite drum performances on a death metal album.
Yeah, Lost Passion is a good example of that because it's pretty open and it's not really fast, but the cymbal work, he has these accents that really just fit perfect in the riff and these spots that there shouldn't be anything there, but he hits these cymbals in there, and it's like, ooh, yeah, I wanted that, in a nasty kind of awkward way. And it's just perfect. This album is really well written through and through.
So we weren't the only people out there that graciously jerked off this album, because this got like a ton of praise from both fans and critics alike, often cited as their best album, which, yeah, we agree.
Agree. Yep.
Now, before the band went on their rigorous touring schedule, Tom Wilkinson actually chose to leave the band. He was replaced by ex-Angel Corpse guitarist Bill Taylor. And in a weird turn of events, despite all the praise and, great reviews for this album, they would end up leaving / parting ways / maybe getting removed from Metal Blade Records. Kind of an odd move. You release like one of your most praised albums, and they're like, we're done here. I guess it's still like debatable as to whether or not they left or they were dropped by the label. I heard both things, but it just seems like kind of a head scratcher, especially considering how fucking awesome Close to World Below was. But soon after, they would enter a contract with both Olympic Records and Lissimo Records. Olympic Records would take care of all their US distribution, and for Europe, Lissimo Records would take care of all of that. And with a new home and a new label, all they had to do, once they finished up touring, which, this band is constantly touring, was go back to the studio. So, needless to say, they went back to Millbrook because Paul was waiting there for them. And once again, he would mix and master this new album they were working on. And on October 28th, 2002, they would release Unholy Cult. All right, this one might be a slightly spicy take, because I know a lot of people love this album, but a lot of people love all these albums, so there was bound to be one spicy take here. I have this at number 9, and it's mainly because it follows such a masterpiece of an album, in my mind. I think the production is a little bit more raw this time, and they kind of went full bore for sinister in here. Like, this is just a flat-out evil, ugly-sounding album. This has all the hallmarks of everything I love about Immolation, but for some odd reason, this one does not hit me as hard. I like that there are some really cool, slower builds to some songs. And once again, the drum patterns are absolutely insane. Of Martyrs and Men, Wolf Amongst the Flock, there's just some insane stuff going on with those twisted fills. Again, this one feels like they kind of tried to recapture the vibe of Close to World Below, but they didn't quite hit it. And while it is great at being dark and just ominous sounding, it kind of loses a bit of the catchiness. This doesn't have as many songs that jump out to me as Close to World Below, but to be fair, every song jumped out at me in that one. Kingdom Divided is definitely a big standout. I think that one has some really nice, epic, evil sound. But this one, it's just lower because it's surrounded by awesome albums, and it had to land somewhere, and this isn't one I reach for as much as I do other albums, so that's kind of just why it landed here. But yeah, still an amazing album, because that's all Immolation releases, in my opinion.
Unlike Nick, I had this record at number 4. I thought this record was super heavy, really started laying in on more of the dissonant riffs versus the melody. While there's still melody, I thought it was heavier than fuck, man. Alex Hernandez has another hell of a performance. As far as Rob's riff writing, I thought he landed another batch of just killer fucking nasty riffs. I like this record just because of how heavy it is. All the songs really, dude. Especially A Kingdom Divided, Reluctant Messiah, and Rival the Atonement. Those are 3 just back to back to back, just punches to the fucking face. The hook grooves are galore. They jam quite a bit in Unholy Cult, Wolf Among the Flock, and Rival the Atonement. There's a lot of parts where they just the vocals drop out and the band just fucking jams. I thought it was a great offering, so number 4 for me.
I agree. I also have this at number 4. I like that within this discography that's very consistent. This is an album that kind of sticks out to me because of their use of the extreme amount of dissonance or eerie sections or certain little intros, that would set it up for the big, just dissonant, heavy reckoning that was coming to your ears. I thought it was a great batch of tunes, and like I said, because of the amount of dissonance that they put in here, I felt like it has a little bit of an individuality compared to some of the other ones in the discography. So number 4 for me.
And I had this number 2. I dug this, of course. I like it. It's dark, brooding, heavy as fuck. It's right up there with some killer shit that is in that same genre for me that I listen to. Unholy Cult, the main riff in the is really catchy. The vocals, again, he does a great job of aligning himself with everything in a manner that makes sense musically and audibly, and everything works really well in this album for me. Rival the Eminent has a great lead-in, and I like the fact that they kept a laid-back kind of feel to it as they did for most of the album, really. It's a lot more dissonant, like you said, and laid-back than their other stuff, which is why I loved it. I loved it, Messiah. I mean, that song drives everything in the fucking ground.
Dude, the title track's an 8-minute fucking devil-worshipping beast. I mean, yeah, it's a sick album, but, I mean,
they got a lot of sick albums.
Now, after touring rounded out in 2002, Alex Hernandez took his leave from the band, and he was quickly replaced by one Steve Scialetti. Actually, you can see performances from both drummers on the tours for this album, because Bringing Down the World, their DVD they put out, actually has performances from both of them. So I guess there was a point where Steve took over, I think, on the tour after Alex left. Now, that came out in 2004, and that was pretty much to pad out a little bit of time for their next release, because in 2004, they also returned to the studio. Guess where they went? Millbrook once again.
No.
I know, it's crazy.
That's crazy.
Some guy named Paul. I think we've talked about him before. They like him. So once again, I believe Paul would handle, mixing, mastering, all the production once again. And on February 5th, 2005, they will release Harnessing Ruin. This is my number 10. And, I mean, in terms of like a drop in quality, yeah, a little bit. I have some issues in terms of songwriting and production on here. Songwriting, I still think is really good. They choose to take a more minimalist approach, I would say, to their style. It's less dissonant. It's more hooky. Like, this kind of just sounds more like a straightforward death metal album. And production-wise, they took a lot of bite off those guitars and kind of turned it to mud.
And the drums.
And the drums, to a degree. This is just sort of a murky listen overall when it comes down to production. But there's some cool things in terms of songs they've done on here that kind of stand out, like Dead to Me. You have some really creepy whispered vocals over some clean sections, and honestly, you don't hear Ross do that at all, and it was surprisingly effective. And I think, the songs are good, they just kind of feel like they took a lot of the edge off. Like, all that distance kind of got dialed back quite a bit. I think this is also a point where Rob is also kind of compensating for that by putting in a lot of leads. Like, you get a lot more quick, short leads on here. But one of the highlights, though, is Steve. Steve's drum work is really fucking solid here. Now, granted, I don't think they were asking him to do as much, because I would say the drum work is far more technical in the last two, but he still nails the performance on here. The main thing on here is I feel like this album's very restrained. But at the same time, I guess you could say it's probably one of their most accessible albums. If Immolation were to have written an accessible album, that's definitely up for debate. I would say that this is probably the easiest one to listen to in terms of like being very new to like more extreme, just ugly death metal. But for me, it fell a bit. I still enjoy it. I just don't go back to it as much.
I had this album at number 9. It's good, but it just doesn't grab me. Like, the songs don't seem as powerful overall. And I don't know what it is about every time Immolation switches a drummer, but every time they switch a drummer, at least in my opinion, the first record that they give that drummer, they fuck him on the mix. Because Steve's a great drummer. As things go on, he, of course, shows his colors, and I've seen Immolation, 4 times, I think, and all 4 times of him with Steve, so he's a hell of a drummer, but I think they kind of fucked him on the mix. I agree with the guitars being muddy, and they seem to lose a lot. Like this album seems to be all about melody, and not so much about the pummeling, crazy, heavy things that make Immolation great, in my opinion. Again, while this isn't bad, just a lot of the songs didn't even really, I didn't even really give stars to. I do like Challenge the Storm. They have a bunch of sick riffs. Son of Iniquity is darker, it's heavier. Still missing some of the grit, though, I think.
Yeah. Title track's good.
Yeah, the title track's good. Crown the Liar, I like that song. It's better live when you can hear everything, though. Overall, it's not bad. None of Immolation is bad, but this record just didn't really grab me. So, number 9.
I got it the same spot, 9, and for really the same reasons. They got more melody in there, but they lost that, a sense of doom, atmosphere. There was just something different about it, and maybe it goes to what you're saying when they change a drummer, maybe the feel is off or whatever.
I don't know what it is, but it happens every time.
Yeah, it is weird.
Doesn't seem like the label would interfere that much. I mean, Olympic was known for releasing super heavy stuff. Same thing with Listenable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's songs on here that are killer, like the title track, Swarm of Terror, is a great riffer, great vibe. The flow through it it's still frantic and crazy, but they manage to create this kind of grounded melody throughout it, which works. Dead to Me kind of takes you on a cool journey. And you don't get too much of that. Those journey, these jams, clean on the album, and it was cool. But it's proof that even for this band, a middle-low ranked record, if you will, is still pretty strong.
I have this ranked dead last. I'm not a big fan of it. It feels very weird in comparison to the rest of the discography. It's still dark and somber, but it's more like lighter darkness with the acoustic touches. And to me, I feel like this album, out of all of them in their discography, death metal is the least important element in the whole mix. Like, I just feel like metal is in the background, and it's all about these feelings and atmospheres and things like that. And for those reasons, this album was just kind of in one ear, out the other for me.
It's really not mixed like a death metal album. Like, I don't know.
Not at all.
There's just something about it, like taking all that crunch off the guitars.
Yep.
Like it's more like a sludge or a doom album. I don't know. Like the mix
it's mixed for like that, but it doesn't fit.
It's missing the grit.
Yeah.
Like the heft of it all. It's just kind of like...
It's like the curtains don't match the drapes.
Now, reviews on this one were a bit mixed. I mean, as you can see here. But honestly, it still kind of went more to the positive side. It still got a pretty warm welcome. I mean, they earned their fan base at this point. And again, if this was one of the biggest drops in quality, according to the fans, this still wasn't that much of a drop. Now, of course, they did a whole bunch of tours, but one in particular I thought was really cool. They recorded one of their shows in 2006 in B.B. King's Blues Club in Memphis, which that's just kind of fucking cool.
Yeah.
Now, interestingly enough, this recording for the show would end up on an EP that came out, Hope and Horror, which came out May 4th of 2007, a full 6 days before their next album dropped. So yeah, kind of a weird release there. So yeah, needless to say, they went back to the studio, and who did they go see? Paul Millbrook.
Hey, Paul.
Yeah. Yep, once again. And for clarity, he did the EP too, as if I needed to even fucking tell you that. So naturally, he did like all the production, I believe also mixing and mastering, and as an added bonus, they got Svenko from Aborted to do the album art for this one, which is pretty cool. So on May 7th, 2007, they released Shadows in the Light. And yeah, one of these albums had to end up at dead last, and it's this one. And this one seems like it's kind of the last place for a lot of people, and I can kind of get it. The best I can say about it is it's an Immolation album. It still checks off all the things I like about Immolation, but it's got some issues. Production issues, once again. I think the guitar tone is really thin on here. And song-wise, it just kind of sounds like they're trying to recapture the old vibe, but the songs don't quite have the impact. Steve's drums sound a bit better on here, but honestly, that's kind of the only thing that sounds a bit better. And man, Rob goes ham on the solos. Now, granted, all the distance is really starting to come back on this one more so, but I swear there are songs in here where there are like 4 or 5 quick solos, and like, okay, I think that's just a little bit too much, because none of the solos really start standing out. Like, it just becomes like a quick little shred fest, and then we're on to the next bludgeoning blast beat or slow doomy breakdown. There's not a lot of character to the leads. There are some good songs, though, that kind of scale back the aggression in favor of some hooks, like a little bit of a callback towards Closer World Below, Weight of Devotion, Passion Kill, and World Agony. Those are probably my big standouts on this album, but I mean, there's other good songs. Deliverer of Evil, I think, is pretty decent. It's just, like, honestly, it's just sort of a there album, and that's my biggest issue with it. It's good, but it doesn't do anything that any of their other albums have done better. And yeah, for that reason, it kind of falls to last place. Again, it's still good. It's just, yeah, they've released a lot of better albums, like literally every other one.
I have this album second to last. To me, it is a shade better than Harnessing Ruin. However, one thing that I felt like very strongly about this album is the collection of songs didn't really gel as much either. It didn't sound like one thought. It maybe sounded like, hey man, let's go back to the riff vault and I have this song, this song, this song, this song. Let's throw them on there and go. There was not as much cohesiveness as I felt like I heard on other albums, and I don't know, man. It's just it was maybe one step above, but nothing memorable to me, and just not crazy about it. That's all I can really say.
Yeah, it feels like a collection of songs rather than an album.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's kind of the big vibe I got in this one.
Yeah, I had it at number 10 as well. Like these guys said, the album as a whole, I just felt like it was really disjointed. Like it just didn't all fit together. And I thought it seemed kind of uninspired. Kind of like you were talking about, just a collection of riffs. Like, all right, let's just put it out. Like, the mix is a pinch better than Failures for Gods. I will say that Steve's drum performance on this record, dude, I felt tired for his arms. Dude, in World Agony, I felt tired for his arms. He is just fucking turnover after turnover. The Weight of Devotion, again, I thought was quite the drum performance. There's good riffs here and there, but I didn't think it gelled together. Just as an album as the whole, it just didn't do it for me. So, number 10.
Number 10, too. The mix, again, although a little bit better than the last one, it's still kind of like a little muddy. The guitars lost that little bite to them.
Very bassy.
Yeah, very bass heavy in that area. And it's not like the bass is mixed up. It's just bass.
Yeah.
It's just up overall.
Those are the bass drums. Yeah,
that too. Yep.
Yeah. There are some spots in this that are awesome. Passion Kill, especially live. I've heard that kills live. Lying with Demons has some cool riffs in it, but overall, like, the album is just, there's not a lot of memorable. Yeah, I like the squealies. I love those things.
I mean, you kind of have to like this band.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. Especially those like weird, dissonant, off-key ones they do, which fits their whole thing to a T. But this one falls for sure because, like, Shred, I think when you said it seems like a riff vault grab, that like made total sense to me, and that fit exactly.
Dude, Den of Thieves sounds like Immolation covering Immolation.
Yeah, yeah. They did a good job with that cover, though.
Yeah. Good job.
So, of course, a ton of tours. They toured pretty much from 2008 to 2010, like, nonstop. Touring with the likes of bands like Nile, Chrysian, Rotting Christ, and Belphegor. I mean, a lot of kick-ass fucking bands.
Sick, too.
I mean, every time I've seen Immolation, they've been with a bunch of
sick
killer
bands.
fucking bands. Now, during this time, they chose to leave listenable records, and honestly, at this point, I believe Olympic Records had closed their doors. I think they ended up folding around 2005. So they were looking for a new home, and they decided to approach Nuclear Blast. And Nuclear Blast was like, fuck yeah, come on by. Now, during this time, before they even signed with Nuclear Blast, they were already working on new material. And of course, where do they go? Paul Millbrook. But there's an interesting wrinkle in this one because someone else actually gets involved in the production this time. They decide to pass on the mastering duties to one Zach Oren of the band Midnight Chaser. He works out of Castle Ultimate Studios in California, and he would become another vital part in terms of the production team because this next album would end up being kind of a fucking giant favorite of fans. So on March 10th, 2010, they would release Majesty and Decay. This is my number 2 album. I bought this the day it came out, and man, I jammed the living shit out of it. This is honestly one of their most epic sounding albums. Like, this is like Nile levels of epic, but also Nile levels of brutality. They found this perfect balance. It's almost close to A World Below Part 2, but I don't know, like there's something even more catchy about it. And I absolutely love the songwriting here. These songs are fucking dynamic as hell. They stand out. A Token of Malice, that crazy dissonant fucking melody. Like, they found a dissonant, squealy fucking melody that can actually get stuck in your head like a fucking pop hook. A Glorious Epoch, Rapture of Gods, the title track. Like, every track on here is absolutely amazing. And they actually made a lot of these songs different from each other in terms of like the dynamics. The production here is some of the best production they've had yet. You know, that right level of compression. The guitars are thick, they're chunky, the drums sound fucking great. Ross sounds like a fucking monster.
Cookie Monster.
Definitely Cookie Monster. I think it kind of took like elements of maybe that slightly catchier approach they went for in Harnessing Ruin, got the right production out of it, and integrated it into their more heavy sound again. And they found this, amazing balance here. Like, I think this is one of their most accessible albums. At the same time, it's also one of their most fucking brutal. It's absolutely amazing. It was practically a 1A 1B situation, but close wins out by a little bit. But yeah, this is an absolutely amazing album.
I also had this at number 2, much like Nick. If there was a 1A and 1B, really, there's a bunch of records I could say are number 1. This was really, really close to number 1. First of all, I can visualize, in listening to all these riffs, I can visualize Rob playing guitar to all of this. If you've never seen Immolation, Rob has this odd style of guitar playing where it's just like... It's like he's using his guitar as a weapon, dude. That's
Judas Priest.
I've never seen anything like it in my life. The first time I saw Immolation, I was like, what the fuck is this guy doing? But I can visualize him playing all these songs. The song A Token of Malice, I love the hooks in that song. It's another beastie ripper. Really, this whole album, I don't have a bad track on this record. Close to a World Below beat it out, but only by a smidgen, and only because that perfection was just a little bit more tasty than this perfection. A Thunderous Consequence, the groove in that song, dude, makes me want to jam. Makes me want to play drums, dude. It's so fucking catchy. The riffs in this record, the mix is back to perfection. Just, this easily could have also been number 1, but we're not allowed to do that, so it's number 2.
I had this at number 4. The production is better. Everything is level. You can hear everything. Everything stands out in its own way. The songs, I guess, stand out. A Glorious Epoch. The intro is awesome. The sound so brooding and dark, and then the main riff comes in and just it blows you away listening to it. It really does. The title track is epic. It grooves hard as hell. The Purge, that whole thing is just top notch. Riffage, start to finish. These albums, they're top 5 or whatever, again, is like interchangeable almost. This band is very consistent. But this is 4.
I am the odd duckling out once again. I put this at number 8. I think for me, going in order, this album just... By the time I had already gone through the last couple albums, I was ready for something different. I think I got something that was a little bit more renewed, a little bit more reinvigorated. However, it didn't recreate the wheel at all. And I think that's really the reason it kind of fell into the middle for me, really, Once again, this is a band that at this point in their career, I've heard everything that they're going to give me, and they didn't really recreate the wheel here. Is it good? Yes. Does anything really stand out to me too much about this? Not particularly. So for me, it kind of fell in the middle. As much as I love Close to a World Below, this one is just okay to me.
I have a Majesty and Decay shirt.
Same here.
Yep.
We bought it at the same show, MDF.
Oh, yeah, we did.
We bought it from Rob.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
So even months before this came out, they were already on the road. They did a U.S. tour with Niall Christian, Abigail Williams, and the Dreaming Dead. And then they did a full European tour after that with Napalm Death, Macabre, and Waking the Cadaver.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know.
That would be fun.
Now, this album would actually land on the Billboard chart. This actually landed number 29 at the Billboard Heat Seekers, which I believe was the highest they ever debuted. So there was a fair amount of hype around this album, and again, at least for 3 of us, it delivered. They wasted absolutely no time and actually put out an EP, Providence, in 2011. It was one of those cool, promotional deals with Scion. You remember the whole Scion putting out EPs for bands, like Revocation did it, Enslaved did it, High and Fire did it. Immolation did it as well, and it's awesome, but we didn't count that one in the ranking, but I did want to make mention that, another awesome release they put out in a short amount of time. Now, this EP was given away during another tour in 2011 with Gigan and Jungle Rot. Yeah, these guys tour with just awesome fucking bands. Now, once again, they returned to the studio, of course, Millbrook, of course, Paul, also getting Zach back in there, too, to master it, but also some engineering from one Ola England. So we got another player in here, and this next album would be at least a little bit different thematically. They would sort of abandon the whole religion sucks thing for a while and talk about something else that sucks in terms of an interesting theme. A lot of this album would be inspired by a multitude of conspiracy theories. And in fact, also another big inspiration behind this was George Orwell's 1984, which has definitely inspired a lot of interesting movies, albums, shows, all sorts of
If
shit.
you've never read that book, read that book.
Yeah, I had to read it in high school, and I'm kind of glad I read it now. Mm-hmm. So on May 10th, 2013, they released Kingdom of Conspiracy. Now I have it on good authority that this album is actually a psyop perpetuated by the Lizard People and the Illuminati at the same time. Or it's just an Immolation album.
It plays at the Denver airport.
It definitely plays at the Denver airport. But this one is different in terms of course, the themes, and it's just sort of like a different shade of darkness. Like, they've kind of rolled over fucking everything they don't like about Christianity at this point. But here's some different stuff, and honestly, it's really interesting. Actually, like, the lyrics are really well thought out on here in terms of the themes. But production always seems to be an issue with this album, at least with like the longtime fans of the band. The drum production people don't like, and I'm kind of indifferent. It's just very loud and very, very processed. Like, this is probably the most like deathcore sounding drums they've had. And it's not necessarily the style. Like, Steve's laying on like all the fucking killer shit that he's known for. It's just the overall sound of them. But overall, this album is notably more brutal. Like, it has all the atmosphere, but man, the guitars are super thick on here. It is just heavier than hell, and every song seems to be more in your face. Like, there isn't a lot of like song building in terms of like building atmosphere. This is all about just erupting right away. Like, the opening track, Kingdom Conspiracy, is honestly one of my favorites, mainly because that breakdown is so fucking heavy. Like, it's one of the heaviest moments in their entire discography, and it's a huge standout. Now, as much as I'm gushing about this one, this does land at number 7 for me. Again, a difficult one to rank. Again, the production, kind of an issue, and just the flat-out brutality of it is awesome, but it's also missing some layers that I like about Immolation overall. But there are a ton of great tracks in here. Echoes of Despair, The Great Sleep, there's some almost blackened elements to it. It's another solid album, and I like the fact that the themes are somewhat refreshing because, again, they've been talking about, how much they don't like Jesus for years for now. And, it's good to see them talk about something else for a bit. But yeah, I think this album's good. I think it's kind of a sleeper, but maybe mixed a little bit differently, maybe closer to the last one. It might stand out a little bit more, but yeah, number 7.
I put this at number 7. I thought this was a slight step forward. I think that having a common theme, like, I guess you could say this was technically a concept album in a way,
Yeah.
So I think with that being said, perhaps maybe I felt some kind of a renewed energy that hadn't been there in a minute. Plus, the past couple albums have been good, but nothing crazy to write home about for me. And I thought this was a step forward in the right direction. So it feels inspired, and it has a little bit more identity, I think, than some of the other ones just because of that conceptual theme. And I liked the production. I didn't have a problem with it. I thought it was okay. It didn't take anything away from it for me. But right there in just kind of the middle of the pack, it's a solid fucking heavy album.
Yeah, most people, again, it's the drums. The drums are the thing.
And that's probably the thing I listen to the least, let's be honest.
Drummers are terrible people.
Don't they have machines that can replace you guys?
Totally. Like, you can just hit a button and then it does everything.
But who's going to bring you your pizza?
Oh, the bassist.
The bassist.
The bassist.
That's
If they let him out of the van.
Yeah.
I also had this at number 7. You gotta put numbers on things. It sucks putting numbers on rankings, but it's at number 7 for me. The more I listen to this album, and this was the first Immolation I ever heard, so a little piece of this I carry with me because this is what got me into Immolation. Going back on it now, however, the more I listen to this record, the more I realize that they did it just a pinch better on Majesty. I didn't think the mix was that bad. Yeah, the drums, but he still puts on a fuck of a performance. The catchy opening and Keep the Silence, again, another one I've seen live that I really enjoy. Bound to Order is a pummeling beast of a fucking song. The breakdown, the nasty breakdown I found in this album was Serving Divinity. The breakdown in that song fucking kills. Again, nothing wrong with this record. Nothing wrong with these songs. I like all the songs. It just fell at number 7 because you got to put numbers on things.
This putting numbers on things dead last for me.
Oh my!
I don't know. I think like what Nick was saying, that there's like a missing layer of Immolation that I think was off of this record. I think the combination of that and it's a good album, but it doesn't have the same amount of riffs and ideas that work with me as their other albums do. The title track, kicks you in the ass a little bit and gives you that really cool jam part that we were talking about. Heavy as shit. A great closer, too. All That Awaits Us, I thought was really cool. And one of the few moments you get kind of a more thrashy Immolation. But, I think it's just the level of broody darkness that was off of this that I just didn't like. I like their other stuff.
I get it. Like, honestly, one of my things is it's very heady in terms of the concept, but the music is more straightforward and brutal.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's kind of cool just to hear a band like, we're just going to write the heaviest fucking thing we can. And this album's fucking heavy. So once again, touring, they landed a spot in the Decibel Tour with Cannibal Corpse and Napalm Death pretty much right after this one dropped. Album got a lot of critical acclaim on here. A little bit mixed with fans, though. So, this one, some fans saw as a bit of a drop-off from the last one. I can kind of see that, too. I mean, it is a drop-off in my rankings, but I still think it's really good. They did a full European tour with Broken Hope in 2014, and at the same time, this is where Bill Taylor chose to exit the band. I believe he went to go join up with Gene Polubicki in Perdition Temple after this, and this was in 2016. I believe he already completed some tours, and I guess there were some personal issues. I really didn't dig too deep into it, but at this point, they recruited one Alex Books of Agoraphobia and Incantation. Actually, he did a couple albums with Incantation. So we brought this guy up before, and he's a really solid fit, and he is currently there now. So after all of this touring and, memberships, or at least one membership, this was one of the longest gaps between albums. They actually stayed on the road for a long period of time, and I don't think they got back in the studio until 2016. So that's a good run at tours. Once again, hitting up Paul Millbrook. Again, we've gone over this multiple times. Pretty much the same team. And on February 24th, 2017, they released Atonement. This is my number 3. I fucking love this album. If we had actually done a 2017 year-end list, we hadn't got to that point yet because we hadn't had a channel yet. This would have been like a top 10 album for me. This is kind of a return to all the things that Immolation does well. Like, this is, almost like Majesty and Decay, except with slightly warmer production. It's not as, chunky and heavy, but, of course, it's still heavy because it's Immolation, but it feels more lush and atmospheric. And man, dude, this band wrote some absolutely killer songs. There's a lot more dynamics on here versus the last one. Whereas Kingdom of Conspiracy was, again, brutal, straight in your face. This one takes time to build songs. Like the opening to Fostering the Divide with that really cool drum intro. It's very isolated. You hear like a kind of a fuzz in the background, and then it just builds up into this absolutely gross breakdown. This is just Immolation doing what they do at peak levels. The songs are catchy, they're brutal. Again, you have that twisted atmosphere in here. I think in terms of that balance of catchy and dissonant and ugly, these are some of Rob's best fucking riffs. A little bit more groovy overall too, like Destructive Currents, Above All, The Power of God. I fucking love this album. The only thing I don't like about this album is this album cover. This album cover is just not good. I love that they brought back the OG logo, but the whole floating Dayglow angel thing, come on, guys. You could do a lot better, and they would. But, number 3 for me, this album is fucking incredible.
I also have it at number 3. I agree with Nick.
Stop copying me.
I ranked this at home away from you. I don't even know how this happened. But yeah, it's number 3 for me. Immolation, the heft comes back. This record is all about evil riffs and nasty groove once again, and they do it so well. The warmth of the guitars reminds me of Morbid Angel, a lot.
I mean, Rob and Trey are very comparable.
Yeah. Fostering the Divide, I think, is one of my all-time favorite Immolation songs ever. And that's a pretty bold statement, but dude, that drum beat is so fucking... Bop, 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 bap, bap, bap. I love it. I fucking love it. I will listen to that song over and over again. Destructive Currents, that's a destructive song. Above All, The Power of Gods with the almost slam-like breakdown. That is a nasty, heavy breakdown. All the things I love about Immolation return in this record, and I couldn't enjoy this record more. Again, if there was a 1, A, B, and C, this would also take number 1, but it can't. It takes number 3. I love everything about this album.
This was my number 6. I like this album a lot. Once again, a lot of the evil atmosphere has returned in triumphant form. This album, more so than any other album, though, it feels like those moments are more cinematic in a way. It almost, there's times where it almost sounds like a movie soundtrack, and that was kind of something interesting to me that stood out. What I put, cinematic atmosphere over that death metal. It kind of creates some interesting earworms, a la Thrown to the Fire, Above All, Distorting Light. Those kind of weird little sections within those songs kind of bring a cinematic flair to it that I hadn't really heard much yet in the discography. So being this far out and hearing a little bit of a new spice in the mix was really interesting to hear. And I think this is a very consistent, badass album. I like it. This is one I feel like, once again, this is the first time I really ever listened to it. But this album feels like the more I listen to this as life goes on, probably the higher in that I'll enjoy it. But for now, it sits right kind of in the middle of the pack. It's very solid.
And this sits at 8, which is probably pretty low, but like 6, 7, 8, that you can flip them around. And now that you mentioned like cinematic aspect, and maybe listening to it again will like you said again, it'll age on me a little bit more. But because I hadn't really listened to that album at all.
Yeah, me neither.
Like,
I bought this the day it came out.
Same.
Yeah. And at that point, I was probably just whatever, into something else. But it floated under my radar, and I'm going to give it some more listens for sure. Because I love Fostering the Divide. John said
fucking amazing.
My favorite Immolation song that I heard. I'm going through this whole discography. That's my favorite Immolation song. Distorting Light. It's the first song. It goes right into it, and it kind of hits all those very familiar Immolation notes that you want and you expect, and it does it really well. So I think maybe I just need to give this some more spins.
So this album got rave reviews from critics and fans alike. I mean, everyone seemed to fucking jump on this one. This was on a lot of year-end lists, including mine if I had actually made one.
If had we done it, it would have been on mine as well.
Yeah. Now, I did a whole bunch of tours from 2017 to 2019, including one with Soulfly and Full of Hell, and a headlining European tour with Melakesh and Azarath. They even got a really good supporting slot on Mayhem's De Mysterious tour for the anniversary of that album, and I mean, if you're going to get an evil death metal band to match up with an evil black metal band, Immolation's a good one to call up on. There's literally too many tours for me to actually listen here, but they toured with everyone. They even did another Decibel tour, and they were getting ready to work on the next album, and then the world shit itself and got like the worst fucking batch of the flu ever, and lo and behold, we are stuck in a pandemic and we are all stuck at home. But meanwhile, Immolation was still working, you know, just staying isolated, still retooling these songs and working on this next album. Now, they did return to Millbrook in 2021 when pretty much they were given the all clear. Everyone was all clear from COVID, and finally started working on these songs in the studio that they had been really fine-tuning. And this ended up being the longest break between albums they had, and to some degree, I think it was actually kind of beneficial. So on February 28th, 2022, they released Acts of God. And this is my number 5. And this album kept climbing on my list as I went through it. I know Steve has actually said in interviews that because he was able to really work on, you know, the drum patterns on this one more intently than he was able to on Atonement, that he really felt like he was totally dialed in on here. And honestly, I think this is probably his best drum performance yet. This is, dude, like there's a level of technical play on here that is absolutely absurd in terms of his drum patterns. And I think that did benefit it. Overall, the production is a little bit more raw. It's not as warm as Atonement, but the songs are vicious and biting and dark. They are back to hating God with all the power and fury that they should. And the songs fucking land. Derelict of Spirits, Noose of Thorns, I absolutely love that opening riff. Like, that is such an instant fucking earworm. But I think this album is just like a touch more brutal again than Atonement. There's a ton of atmosphere once again, but I just feel like this is more about just riffs and just being ugly and evil. The hardest picks in terms of like ranking this one were between this album and Atonement, because they are very similar and they're both representing Immolation kind of just getting back to what they do well. You know, albeit, I mean, they really haven't missed on this discography very much, but these last 2 albums have been some of their strongest work, I think. And yeah, I absolutely love this one. I may have spent like the least amount of time with it, but that's just because it's newer and I've jammed all the other ones like a fucking 100+ times each. But yeah, I really dig this one. So yeah, landed at number 5.
I put this at number 9. It is a solid, heavy, aggressive album. The atmosphere and the dissonance is back. The dissonance in full effect. I felt like this album was a little long in the tooth. I don't think it needed to be 53 minutes long. It dragged on a little bit, and while I felt like it was a solid batch of songs, once again, in the grand scheme of everything I listened to, I really found myself gravitating more towards the older stuff. So while this is awesome, it's modern, it's heavy, it's the now, it still kind of falls in the middle to me compared to a lot of the other songs and albums that they've put out thus far. Once again, will it change as time goes on? Who knows? But as of right now, it sits at number 9 for me, and that's all I can say about that.
It sits at number 8 for me. I'm kind of with Shred on this. As I went through all these albums, and let me tell you, I listened to all these albums over and over and over and over again. This ranking has been the devil, much like found in most of their songs.
He's the protagonist, though.
It's heavy, it's dark, the dissonance again back in full effect. The songs are all great. I simply just need more time with this record. It's been the one I've listened to the least, albeit it made it in my end of year in 2022. There were a lot of other things that made it in there as well. I do like this album. I fucking enjoy it. Overtures of the Wicked, Blooded, Shed the Light, Derelict of the Spirit I thought was actually kind of blackened a little bit too. There's many, many good things in this record. I simply just need more time with it. I don't have anything to knock it otherwise. The 2 interludes,
They're not on my phone.
And I agree with Shred in the sense that it did not need to be 53 minutes. The more songs, you get 15 fucking songs. You go back in the rest of their albums and they have 8 songs. 9,
That's
10,
what you like. 7, 8.
7, 8, great.
I have ADD, man. Come on.
Yep, I do too.
I can't focus for very long.
It's really not a knock per se.
No.
I do think that the kick drums were a little clicky, but one of the other things I had to do while ranking all this was to get nitpicky because of how much Immolation kicks ass. I had to go back through and be like, all right, how can I do this? How can I rank this? That's my nitpicky. It's a little clicky. It drowns out the drums sometimes. Again, not a big deal. All these songs are killer. All of Immolation is killer, but it sits at number 8, and it might go up the more time I spend with it, because much like at least this guy, I've jammed Majesty and Decay and Close to a World Below and Atonement and just over and over and over and over and over again. And by the time you get to this point, I'm just like, yeah, it's good, but it's nowhere near the things I really like. So, number 8.
I had it at 3, which is much higher than my counterparts here. I dug it. It's probably because I listened to it the most, because it's been in my rotation since it came out. I think it was an honorable mention of my list. It could not have been. I don't know. I forget everything. So
you let the darkness in.
But what you were saying, it's like just the riffs are there. It's dark. It's brooding. I kind of dig the back dial a little bit on the production, where it's got a little more like an older school kind of bite to it, if you will. Blooded sounds, huge, epic. I like the flow of the song. The flow of all these songs are pretty well done, I think. In the past, they sometimes get chaotic, especially in their transitions, but everything about this was good, and I think it's just because I've listened to it the most. It's been in my rotation. Overtures of the Wicked, there's a few thrashy moments in that song, which I really, really enjoy, but it still sounds like Immolation. They don't lose their identity in any of this, and I think they're kind of branching out a little bit into some areas and still sitting in their pocket, which they need to do because their fucking pocket is awesome. I love listening to their albums. And again, I'm going back to what I said in the beginning. I don't love this band. I like this band a lot, but I think going over them in this ranking is definitely bumped them up a few notches for me. But yeah, 3, Exegod. It's awesome. Yeah. Love it.
And yeah, that is pretty much it. And I imagine they're either getting ready to do another tour or working on another album at this point. This band has some serious work ethic, and I commend them for it, because I can't wait for the next album, because I imagine it's going to sound like a kick-ass Immolation album, because that's their gear, and they do it so fucking well. This band has literally carved out their own niche within death metal, and it's absolutely awesome, and it was great going over these albums.
Yeah. Yep, had a lot of fun.
And also, I am very excited to announce to you that the next discography ranking will be the Mighty Judas fucking Priest. I am stoked. This is what I've been waiting for. The other guys are about to go listen to 19 albums. A lot of them they probably haven't listened to or listened to in a while.
Piece of cake.
That is not the case for me. I grew up as a kid around adults that were into heavy metal. I was very lucky. They took me in very early, and I learned early on that the Holy Trinity was Black Sabbath, Iron Maiden, and Judas Priest.
But before that, since that one's going to take a while, we're going to have an extra little treat that, well, just stay tuned in the community comments. I'll have something for you guys to talk about there. But of course, before you do that, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon, too. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there, as well as our store, which we will be loading up on some cool merch. We definitely have some stuff working.
Yeah, we got a cool-ass new design.
Yep, and we will definitely notify you guys with probably a goofy-ass video, just like, look at our fucking shirts. Something's cool. Please buy them. But yeah, we will definitely let you know. And we also have a giveaway going on for when we eventually hit 15K subs, which is coming up really quickly. We're within 200 now?
200 now,
yeah,
I
that's
think. Yep.
pretty fucking crazy. Anyway, the giveaway has 10 CDs in it. There is a video link down below. All you have to do is comment on it, and you are entered. And once we hit the magic number, I'll do a comment randomizer and decide a winner. And we'll all celebrate because we'll be at 15K.
And that brings us to the most important thing. The 15K, you guys. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend it with a bunch of jackasses like us. We can't think of a better way to spend our time than with you guys talking about the things that we love. Heavy metal.
And, probably dick jokes, too.
A lot of dick jokes.
A lot of dick jokes. Farting. Oh, we love farting. But seriously, guys, you're the ones that keep us going, and we appreciate the living shit out of you. So once again, thank you all, and we will catch you later.
We're still having fun, and you're still the one.
Weird.